Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So today I'm going to review a few more cards recently released out of the Goblins vs. Gnomes expansion. And, well, it should be pretty exciting because one thing I do want to mention is that the Paladin is now the first class to have received 5 class cards. And, well, while that sounds exciting, it's actually going to be pretty disappointing to see how they actually roll out. So what I'm going to do today, review a few ones that I missed, and go over kind of like the Paladin class, and what's going to be going on with that. So let's get to it. We have Steam Whittle Sniper. This is a hunter card. It's 2 for a 2/3, and your hero power can target minions, which is really cool. It's similar, basically, it's a little mini Akanai Soul Priest, except not as radical because the hunter already does damage, but it is radical because most hunter decks focus on direct damage in the later stage of the game. And this might look like a 2-drop, but it's actually not a 2-drop. It's not a 2-drop because if you play him as a 2-drop, you can't use your hero power on that same turn. And it's probably going to die to your opponent's 2-drop. It's basically going to be garbage. It's basically going to be a really terrible Amani Berserker. So this is not a 2-drop. This is more of a 4-drop. You kind of want to look at this card kind of like you look at Keeper of the Grove, for instance, which is 4 for a 2/4 with the possibility to silence or do 2 damage. And when you compare it to a card like that, it's not particularly good, but because you can reuse it, it's kind of good. So this card doesn't really fit in the current hunter deck. If there is going to be like a control hunter, more reliant on board control, killing stuff, doing all that kind of stuff, you know, maybe it'll be pretty good. But right now, it just doesn't really fit. In Arena, I think this card is going to be pretty good because as a hunter, usually you're going to win games by 1, having a crazy deck, which this card doesn't really matter, and 2, by playing the board control game, then going all in later stage of the game. And this card will let you get there. So I think it's a pretty good Arena card, especially against most epics in Arena. Next card up, actually one of my favorite ones so far released. It's Druid of the Fang, and this card has actually triggered some other things to happen in the game. Druid of the Claw, which when is played as a 4/6 taunt or a 4/4 charge, is currently not a beast, will become a beast, as well as you know, maybe some revisits of other cards like Stranglethorn Tiger might be included in Druid decks to activate this card, because it's 5, not for a 4/4, but when you have a beast, it's a 7/7, and because it's transformed, it is basically like the Druid of the Claw type battle cry. The creature will be itself a new card, so I think it's going to be like a snake. So basically it's 5 mana. If you have another beast in play, instead of a 4/4, you get a 7/7 snake. Yes, it can be big game, but damn, that's a lot of creature worth for 5 mana. That's one of the most powerful creatures in the game if you have a beast in play. And because Power of the Wild, because Druid of the Claw gets changed, because Stranglethorn Tiger is pretty good, because Haunted Creeper is pretty good, well, this card's probably going to be played. And as a result, it's pretty sick. What's not sick? The Paladin Legendary. Bolvar 4 Dragon, our legendary WoW hero from Wrath of the Lich King, is a pretty awful card. It's 5 for a 1/7. I mean, if you compare that to the Druid of the Fang, as some people have, whenever a friendly minion dies while this is in your hand, gain +1 attack. Basically, 6 minions on the board have to die, and you can kind of compare that to having a beast in play. And it's not very good for that. I mean, it's a legendary, it's an iconic kind of thing in the Warcraft scene. It's silenceable. It's a terrible top deck. I mean, if you're in top deck mode, this is a 5 for a 1/7. It's basically one of the worst stat creatures in the game. It just doesn't really work. One more thing to note is that if you do actually successfully use this creature, if you kind of save it until turn, you know, 6 or 7 or 8, and you actually play, let's say, like a 10/7 for 5 mana, kind of like to tempo out your opponent, well, it's actually then going to be the only creature in the Paladin deck that gets Big Game Hunted. So people are probably going to run Big Game Hunter. There's a lot of big creatures coming up. And, well, if that's the only thing that hits in the deck, well, that's what it's going to do. It's going to die to Big Game Hunter. This card, as I see it, has some potential to be played, but very slight. In my opinion, it's mostly good after a board clear. So if you get lucky enough with like a Doomsayer to kill a couple minions or something like that, Or if you do like a Pyro Equality, like on turn 9, and then bam, Bolvar. Or just you do like Equality, you run like 6 dudes into your opponent's board, and bam, Bolvar 4 Dragon, 7/7 for 5 mana. You know, there's some tempo potential, but because of what I want to show you guys, it's not enough. Basically, his ability in the Paladin deck is not so good. And as a card in general, it's not so great. It's too weak to silence, it's too situational, it's a garbage top deck. Often when you play, it won't be very good. It doesn't fit with the Paladin theme. So because of that, it's basically terrible. However, I do want to mention that not only is this legendary terrible, but also the Paladin class as a whole right now is probably the worst class in the game. And because of that, I was hoping to see, being my favorite class, improvements to the Paladin class. I was hoping to actually see the most overpowered shit come out of Paladin. And in fact, we haven't really seen that. I'm going to go over the cards here, the ones that have been so far released from the Goblins vs. Gnome expansion. And again, it's important to note that there are 5 Paladin cards currently released, whereas other classes like Warlock have 2, most others have 3. So Paladin may not actually get many more cards than what you see here. In fact, there's actually a possibility that there are no more Paladin cards yet to be revealed. So let's go over the few and see what you guys see. For you guys to see what I see, I mean. Muster for battle, it's 3 mana, summon 3 1/1 dudes, and equip a Light's Justice. Overall, in terms of value, this card is pretty good. It kind of fits the Paladin thing. The main issue is that when people play control, they basically just fill up the board with dudes, and just getting more dudes may not actually work too well because they're all going to die to the same thing. The 1/4 weapon might be useful, it might not be useful. In general, as a card by itself, it's pretty solid, but it is certainly not a card that will carry a class, in my opinion. But overall, pretty good. I was impressed with this card. I still think it's quite good in both Constructed and Arena, especially if the metagame stays about the same, where there's a lot of early game being played. Then we have Coghammer. Coghammer is, again, a pretty alright card. It's basically a Stormforged Axe without Overload, but it costs 1 more mana, so it may not actually kill something the turn it's played, but you give a minion Taunt and Divine Shield, and often when you look at cards, the value of Divine Shield is 1 mana, so, you know, playing this strategically on a big minion to save yourself, doing a little bit of extra damage, it's a pretty good card. I kind of like it. The main disadvantage is that it's a 3-drop, and, well, no Paladin deck will ever get rid of True Silver Champion, which is a 4-drop, and to actually use up 3 durability may be pretty unlikely. So if you play Coghammer, it makes True Silver a little bit worse. You absolutely surrender Sword of Justice, which has synergy with the other Paladin cards. So because of that, even though this card is pretty good on its own, again, it doesn't really carry, and it actually has, if you really look at it, a bit of negative synergy with currently the best Paladin card released in Goblin vs. Gnomes. Then we have Scarlet Purifier, which is 3/4/4/3, which is pretty solid stats. Again, alright if played with stuff like Coghammer, but kind of bad if followed up by True Silver, because True Silver does 4 damage, and usually a 4/3 just dies to the 2-drop, because most 2-drops are 3/2 creatures. The battle cry is pretty good, but it's not really powerful enough. A lot of Death Rattle creatures want to be played. It's a cool card, but it doesn't carry. It's certainly no Dark Cultist, for instance. It's fairly mediocre. I think if it was a 3/4, it would have been very good, because Paladin doesn't really have many sticky minions, and Paladins in general don't have many minions with good stats. Notably, Cobalt Guardian. Man, what a piece of crap. It's 5 for a 6/3, and here's one thing that some people are not really getting right now. With Goblin vs. Gnomes, they actually introduced the mech theme. So, you know, people playing Death Rattle decks, people playing Beast decks, people combine those two to play Hunter decks. And now people are going to play mech decks. They're going to be like aggressive. There's going to be so much synergy. You're going to do like mech Death Rattle, mech Divine Shield. Yep. Well, as it turns out, while some classes already have multiple mechs released in their Goblin vs. Gnomes card lists, like Druid, who has 3 cards released, has 2 mechs, for Paladins, this is the only one. So you actually have to play the neutral mechs compared to the other classes which have really, really good class mech cards to make this garbage work. And let's just say that you make it work. Let's just say that, oh great, on turn 7, you play some dumpster mech along with this card, and you have a 6/3 Divine Shield along with some other garbage creature. Well, that's basically just going to die to hero power and whatever's left on the board, if you haven't lost the game already from the very terrible tempo play. So this card is kind of good. It's kind of one of those cards that can very rarely get out of control, but no one's going to play this. And if you don't play this, why would you play Paladin in a mech deck? And really, the question is, if you're not going to play mech, if you're not playing Paladin for the new cards, if you're not playing Paladin for the Legendary, why would you play Paladin at all? So it's a little bit disappointing. We're going to see a lot fewer people being well met, I think, after this expansion. And I hope Blizzard really does something to fix this. It's true that Blizzard doesn't fix too many cards, at least not recently, but I'm hoping that with an expansion as big as this one, with the balance really being up in the air on launch, that maybe they'll reconsider. Maybe they'll look at the Paladin after release a little bit. Because, well, people are not complaining that Paladin's overpowered right now. In fact, it's a little bit of the opposite. So, this kind of sucks. I'm hoping things will change. I'm hoping that if there are more Paladin cards yet to be seen, that they totally kick ass, because they're going to need to. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my review, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.